Hello everybody, it's Zach here from realestatelicensewizard.com. Today we've got a special video planned. Today we're doing a real estate exam review with an actual real estate student who, guess what guys? They have their exam tomorrow. I know, it's crazy. He's been working so hard, just like many of you guys at home. I'm sure you're feeling the same way. You're eager to get in there, take that exam, all that good stuff. So how'd this happen? Well, basically, I have a friend. His name is Spencer. He lives in Ohio. He called me up the other day. He was like, Zach, I'm getting my real estate license. Do you mind if you help me a little bit? I said, of course, we can do some reviewing as long as we put it on our channel here on Real Estate License Wizard. And he said, of course. Yeah, that's fantastic. So what happened? I put together a bunch of materials. It's all national stuff, which means, as you guys should know, it's national. It's good for all 50 states. We did fair housing stuff in the beginning because that's kind of what he asked about. He was struggling a little bit. So we reviewed that. And then we did a bunch of test questions in this video. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and please in the comments give Spencer some love and really admiration. He did such a fantastic job. It's really hard to do this kind of stuff, especially on the spot, you know, with recording involved. So please give Spencer some love. But anyways, guys, thank you so much. Hopefully you guys enjoy, and let's just jump right into it. All right, hello everybody. We're here with Spencer, and we're going to be doing some studying today. So we're going to be starting off with some flashcards. Say hi to everybody, Spencer.
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right, so we're going to be doing some flashcards. These are going to have to do with fair housing. So the way this is going to work is we're going to take a look at the flashcard. Spencer, just let us know what you think the answer is. You know, give us some time in between before you give us the answer, and then we'll discuss the correct answer, or, you know, we'll make sure you're on the right track and whatnot. So let's just jump right into it and get this started. So our first term is block busting. Do you know what that has to do with?
Give me a minute here. So I think block busting is when agents only show houses to a certain demographic, or try to get them to sell their house in a certain area because a certain race is moving in. Is that right?
Yeah, so you're on the right track. Block busting is the illegal practice in which licensees or others encourage homeowners to sell because of an influx or an expected influx of minorities into an area, also known as panic selling and panic peddling. So an example of this is if real estate agents alert a bunch of members of the neighborhood and they say like it's changing or there's a bunch of people moving in and that they should sell their property. So, you know, urging members of a neighborhood that they should sell before their property value decreases. Obviously, that wouldn't make any sense. It's not true, but that in itself is block busting. So it's like the illegal practice itself, where, you know, they're encouraging homeowners to sell because of, you know, minorities coming to an area. Now, that's not to be confused with these next two terms, which you know, at the end of these three terms, we'll explain it all. That way, kind of makes a little more sense, more sense, because I totally understand how these can be a little bit confusing. But let's check out this next term. So steering. Do you know what that means?
I believe steering is when the agent guides people to a certain neighborhood that's similar to their ethnicity.
Yeah, so that's pretty much spot on there. So steering, practice of channeling home seekers to particular areas. So again, an example of that would be if like there was two different buyers and they, you know, roughly had the same financial profiles and similar needs. However, one maybe was like a minority and one is not. And the agent sends the one buyer that's not the minority, maybe like 40 listings in expensive neighborhoods and communities, where the minority, they would send maybe like only 20 listings into like two specific communities. So again, it's another fair housing violation, which is, you know, kind of where we're jumping into this. But this one more focuses on restricting the purchaser's freedom of choice. So they're, you know, it's not the agent's job to determine, you know, what people can buy. It's up to the buyer to determine that, especially, you know, there shouldn't be any racial, you know, motivations to determine where certain buyers go. But yeah, that's good. You're pretty spot on there. So redlining, what does that mean?
Okay.
Yeah, and if you don't know, I guess, you know, before we get too far, if you don't know, you know, an answer, that's totally fine too. But just, you know, take a couple seconds to figure out each one before you jump in.
So I think redlining has to do with lenders not giving loans to, is it not giving loans to minorities specifically, or not giving loans in certain areas?
It's a little bit of both, actually. So that's a pretty good answer. I mean, not gonna lie, that's almost spot on. The specific answer is the illegal practice of receiving services, financial or real estate, because of race, national origin, or etc. However, that etc. part could be like if they're from a specific neighborhood, which is kind of what you're getting at. Now, this does come up, as you mentioned, in mortgages, insurance, loans, stuff like that. However, what's interesting about this actually is some people get steering and redlining confused. But actually, steering is a form of redlining. So that's how those terms are actually connected. Since with steering, they're withholding from certain services, aka like showing properties, that makes it a form of redlining. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the nice thing about that, is if you kind of understand the one term, you can kind of understand the other. But again, with these three terms, sometimes people get a little confused on them, but just try and break them up individually. And I think you'll be fine. Do you have any questions on those terms?
No, I just thought it was only due to mortgages, so I wasn't aware that it was insurance and loans. So that helps a lot.
Yeah. So yeah. If you look, I believe like the original law that they did for redlining, when they like actually specifically named it, it was loans and mortgages, but now they've kind of expanded on that into like insurance, things like that. But for our sake and for the real estate exam, as long as you get like a general idea of what it is and kind of how it operates, you should be fine. But all right, so the next one, we're going to be diving into the specific civil rights acts. So this is tricky for a lot of people, but just try and give your best answer on what you think the Civil Rights Act of 1866 is.
Okay, so I think there was a revision to that that added more, but I think this is the original one. So it just protects classes based on their race and national origin and ethnicity.
Yeah, so that's pretty much spawn on, except for it's just race. And this is like the foundation of the civil rights. And what you'll see a little bit sooner is when they add the different ones. But yeah, pretty much you're spawn on there. So now this one, do you know what this one is?
I believe that was an updated version, and they added more classes.
So you're going to notice a pattern with these in terms of order and adding more classes. But specifically, the Civil Rights Act, Title 18, 19, or I'm sorry, Title 13. That is Title 13, right? I forget my Roman numerals.
I think it's,
or is that 8?
I think it's 8. I think an X is a 10.
That's right. Title 8, 1968. I know this might be unfamiliar for a lot of people seeing the Roman numerals, but when you see the answer, you're going to be like, oh, that's what it is. So anyways, do you know what this is?
I think it was restricted discrimination against people because of not only their race, but also family status and national origin, ethnicity.
You're kind of on the right track. You're kind of on the right track. So let's take a look at the exact answer here. So it is actually, this is why I laughed earlier. This is the Fair Housing Act. This is actually what it was, that's why we rarely see the Roman numerals actually. But this is basically the Fair Housing Act itself. This is when it was introduced in 1968. The fancy name, though, is the Civil Rights Act title, whatever that Roman numerals, 1968. But if you see here, this prohibits color, race, religion, and national origin. But you mentioned familiar status, but that's actually not here yet, so that's worth mentioning. And a lot of times on the exam, it is a little ridiculous that they are so specific, because it's like, oh well, shouldn't I just know like the newest law? But again, they really try and trick you guys in terms of asking you specifics in terms of what year and what law and things like that, which I'm sure you'll know. But yeah, so for this one, remember that if you do see that long term of that Roman numeral, just remember that is the Fair Housing Act itself. And then again, that's color, race, religion, and national origin. All right, so the next one is Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. So give yourself a couple seconds and then come up with what you think that is.
I'm not sure which one that is.
Okay, that's no biggie.
Does that add in the familial status?
Not yet. Not yet. So this one actually has to do with sex and gender. So that's the big thing there. And again, it's like you never would have thought, right? Because especially like people our age or even younger, you just think that that's a given. But yeah, it took up until 1974 for them to specifically prohibit it in the law form, at least in housing. But yeah, so that's the one for 1974. And then we got Fair Housing Amendments Acts in 1988. So this one, you could go ahead and take a couple seconds and then come up with your guess on this one.
Well, I hate to say this again, but is that the one that adds in familial status?
Yes.
Okay.
That is it. Okay, so it's this one's actually handicap and familiar status.
Okay.
So that's that one, and then there's one more. And then there's one more. I'll give you a couple seconds for this one, and then at the very end, before we jump into our next section of reviewing, I'm going to give you a little synopsis of the individual states. But yeah, just think about what you think this one is.
Okay. I believe that's one that prohibits specifically discrimination based on disability.
That is
and disability alone, right?
Yes, 100% correct. So good job on that one. But yeah, so pretty self-explanatory there. I mean, it has disabilities in it. So that's kind of given there. Now, conclusively, to wrap up kind of like this mini section that we did on fair housing and kind of the acts, as well as some of the things that are not allowed. Just remember to, and obviously I know you know this, Spencer, but just for our regular audience, that there are additional protections per state. And some states have more than others in terms of gender and I know age is one that they've added in some states, and there's a lot of different ones, but just keep that in mind as well. Do you happen to know the additional ones for Ohio, Spencer?
I believe there's an Ohio Civil Rights Act.
Okay. So yeah, that's something good that you'll want to just check at and review. And for those of you guys listening and watching, to make sure that your specific state, Civil Rights Act or, fair housing laws that they've added. Because again, it does vary per state, and they add, individual things for each. So anyways, taking another turn from this, we're going to do some test questions now. So give you a little bit of a warm up here. And now we're going to do some test questions. So hopefully that helped you with the fair housing. Before we do end that, do you have any other additional questions on like fair housing, or that I can answer?
Let me go. If you don't mind, can I just go through them again? So
yeah, sure.
There was, first one was the original Fair Housing Act of 1868. Okay.
Yeah, so that's the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that was just specifically on race.
On race. Mm-hmm.
And then Title 8 is also called the Fair Housing Act.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And that was color, race, religion, and national origin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then 1974 was they added sex and gender.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the latest one.
And you got two more after that.
Okay. Fair House 1988, handicap and familial status.
Mm-hmm.
And disabilities.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it's just like that. And, who knows, maybe 10 years from now, they'll add some more. But for now, this is what we're working with federally. And again, I just want to highlight that one more time that, there are additional ones per state. But because we're just doing a national review in this video and with you today, Spencer, we're just going to keep it at that. So, alrighty. So are you ready for these test questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, I'll go ahead and read the question. I'll read the answers and then just give everybody, a good 5 to 10 seconds in between when you give an answer. And then I'll kind of just go through the answer itself and a little bit, after that if we're still getting some confusion going on. But yeah, so that's how it's going to work. So let's just jump in and I'm going to read this question. So it says, which of the following two real estate contract clauses protect the lenders in some way, usually by asking for some form of insurance or payment? We got the alienation and release clause, the acceleration clause and release clause and prepayment penalty clause, and then the acceleration clause and prepayment penalty clause. So give yourself some time, 5-10 seconds there, Spencer, and then just come up with your answer, okay?
Okay. I believe it's D, acceleration clause and prepayment penalty.
Yes, so that is correct. So let's see if this little star thing worked. Yep, there we go. We had a star. So the key words here are lender and payment. So some of these provisions protect the borrower, lender, or both. But the acceleration clause and prepayment penalty clause is the best answer here, hands down. For those of you guys who don't know, and I guess for bonus points, do you know what the acceleration clause and prepayment penalty clause is, Spencer?
I believe the prepayment penalty clause is when you try to pay off your mortgage early.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't make, the mortgage company doesn't make all the interest off of your payments. And the acceleration clause is, so I know the alienation clause is when you go to sell your house and they demand the full loan amount back. But I'm not quite sure what the acceleration clause was.
So actually, the acceleration clause is the provision that requires a borrower to repay all of the outstanding loan if upon breach of contract, which definitely, protects the lender and their interest asking for repayment. I'm not going to say the alienation clause because I believe we're going to cover that a little bit later.
Okay.
But yeah, so you got the prepayment penalty clause down pat. And you were on the verge of the acceleration clause there too. So, but yeah, again, when just, quick recap on this question, it's just basically looking for, the lender and the payment. And what you'll notice with a lot of these contract clauses is they have to deal with, the lender in some way, protecting themselves. And in this instance, we're specifically talking about, payment and insurance. So, all right, let's check out the next question. So the question says, which of the following fiduciary duties continues after a listing agreement expires? We've got loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, and reasonable care and diligence. So give yourself some time and give our audience some time and then come up with your answer on that one, Spence.
Okay. I believe it's A.
A.
Or wait a minute. Loyalty, disclosure. I believe it's B. Sorry about that. It's B.
Okay, so you're actually wrong. The correct answer here is C. So, the fiduciary duty of confidentiality lasts forever. Now, confidentiality requires that you do not disclose any information learned about your clients their business, financial, or personal affairs or motivation. Again, this duty lasts forever. Believe it or not, loyalty, disclosure, things like that, due diligence, reasonable care, that's just for the listing agreement itself. You just have to do that. And it makes sense, because when you actually think about these duties, you shouldn't be required to have loyalty to somebody for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But confidentiality, on the other hand, if you're learning something that, could jeopardize one of your clients in the future, no matter what it be, you owe it to them to be confidential. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, those are kind of trick questions, so don't worry that you missed that one. So, okay, so this one is Tina and Tom are two unmarried individuals who own property with equal interests and without a right to survivorship. Which of the following forms of ownership would Tina and Tom most likely have? A, tenants by the entirety, B, tenancy in common, C, community property, or D, joint tenancy. So give yourself some time to come up with this answer, and then answer whenever you're ready.
Okay, I think the only one that comes without the right of survivorship is B, tenancy in common.
Yeah, nice. Great job. Yeah, that's a tricky one. A lot of people mess that one up, and you got it there. So obviously, community property and tenants by the entirety have to deal with marriage. You can't have that form of ownership with two unmarried individuals, and that's what we have here in this instance. So we can kind of eliminate A and C just from knowing, that they're unmarried. Now, when we are exploring B and D as our option, as you mentioned, we have to just take a look at the right of survivorship, and knowing that the right of survivorship, if you don't have it, it would be the tenancy in common. That's how we can derive our answer. So good job on that one. A lot of people miss that one up, so you're a step ahead. So, all right, next one. A parcel of real property that has an easement over another piece of property is best described as, and then there's four options: A, a servient estate, B, a dominant estate, C, an estate in sufferance, and D, an estate in tenement. So give yourself some time and then come up with the answer on that one.
Okay, so I think the property that has the easement would be considered the dominant estate.
Correct. Yes, good job. Yeah, so it's as simple as that. By definition, dominant estate is just the parcel of real property that has an easement over another piece of property. And do you know the good way to remember that? It's just, it's dominating. Just think of it like that. And then this one dominates, and then the other one serves. That's like the little, way to kind of remember that. But yeah, good job.
I know that because of your YouTube video and the diagram that you laid out there.
Thank you.
That was
yes.
very helpful.
Yes, thank you. That diagram took me way too long to make. But anyways, and I guess one more thing before we jump into this next. If you have any other questions throughout this, feel free to just pause, and we can just kind of discuss, because this is obviously for you so that you can get that, pass that exam tomorrow, but also just for everybody in general, because a lot of times sometimes people are thinking the same question that you are. So
okay.
But all right, so this question says, generally speaking, what happens when the supply of available houses in an area increases significantly? It gives us four options. A, the average cost of housing goes down. B, the average cost of housing goes up. C, commission rates are raised. Or D, commission rates are lowered. So give yourself 10 seconds to come up with the answer, and then just shout out whenever you're ready.
Okay, so if the supply goes up, there are a lot of houses available for sale, which means people have a lot of choices. So I would assume that the average cost of housing goes down. A.
Correct. Yes. Good job. So, obviously, I don't know. Have you ever taken an economics class?
I didn't.
Okay.
I got lucky.
Oh, nice.
Maybe I got lucky. Maybe I didn't.
So in basic economics, the first thing they're going to hammer into your head is supply and demand. And to imagine it like a scale. Usually if one side raises, the other will lower, vice versa. But generally speaking, low supply and high demand increases price. And while in contrast, the greater the supply and the lower the demand, the price tends to fall. So in our terms, in real estate, when we're just doing these basic supply and demand problems, when the supply of available houses in an area increases significantly, the average cost of housing goes down. Now, obviously, that's just a general statement. And again, this is just general supply and demand problems because obviously there's other factors included. But when we're just generally speaking, we can kind of evaluate like that. So good job on that one. All right, next one. Okay, so what is the best definition listed for the term conventional loan? And it's got these 4 definitions here. So A, a type of loan insured or guaranteed by the government. B, the most basic form of a U.S. loan, typically the most popular too. C, a type of loan that follows all the rules of an adjustable rate mortgage or balloon loan. Or D, a type of loan that is not insured or guaranteed by the government, but backed by private lenders. So give yourself some time there and then, just say your answer whenever you're ready.
Okay. I believe there are only a few types of loans that are guaranteed by the government. 2, maybe there are more than 2, but 2 that I know of. I don't think conventional loans are, so I think it's D, type of loan that's not insured by the government.
Correct. So this is one of those trick questions here, mainly because of the first part. It says, what is the best definition? Because technically, you could argue maybe it's B as well because it is a basic form of loan, but I wouldn't say it's B because, 2 reasons. It says a U.S. loan, which kind of like sounds a little fishy there. And 2, that part where it says the most popular, who knows what the most popular is. But we do know for a fact that conventional loans are a type of loan that is not insured specifically or guaranteed by the government, or backed by private lenders. So that's kind of how we know for a fact that it is D. But yeah, good job on that one because sometimes these loans, people can mix them up all the time. So good job there. Okay, so the next question. The legal principle under which a person who does not have legal title to a property acquires legal ownership based on the continuous occupation of the property. A, condemnation. B, eminent domain. C, adverse possession. Or D, inverse condemnation. So give yourself some time and then come up on the answer on that one.
So I know that I think eminent domain has to do with the government's power. I believe that it's C, adverse possession.
Correct. Good job. So adverse possession is almost word for word what they gave us in terms of the question. If we read the definition for adverse possession, it reads, is a legal principle under which a person who does not have legal title to a property acquires legal ownership based on the continuous occupation of the property. If successful in proving adverse possession, the person or parties are usually not required to pay the owner of the property. That's pretty wicked. So, so you're pretty much spot on there. This is one of those questions where they're giving you, somewhat of a definition and you just kind of have to correlate it to a term. But yeah, this is good because you definitely don't want to get this mixed up with eminent domain. And you were right to just eliminate that immediately because, again, that does have to do with the government. So, all right, let's do the next one.
So are we going to, if I don't want to jump ahead if you're going over inverse condemnation, but could you explain that unless you have it later in a slide?
Let me double check. Why not? Are you taking notes?
Yeah, I can take a note and I'll put a note to ask you at the end.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that, for the sake of not only you and the viewers, but we don't spill the beans and then we have a question, up ahead and then we're like, oh, I know that one because we already talked about it. You know what I mean? Okay. So yeah, just feel free to just mark that. And then anything else that, you want to cover, we can do at the end. But Okay, so next question. There are three main forms of depreciation. What are there? Or what are they? And I'll read these real fast. So there's four options, and they each list a couple options. So A is major obsolescence, minor obsolescence, physical deterioration. B is seasonal obsolescence, quarterly obsolescence, and yearly obsolescence. C is seasonal obsolescence, economic obsolescence, and physical deterioration. And then D is economic obsolescence, functional obsolescence, and physical deterioration. So give you a couple seconds to come up with your answer there. Think about that and then just tell it to me.
Okay, well, I know there's no such thing as seasonal obsolescence. So I think it's D, economic, functional, and physical.
Are you sure?
I am absolutely sure.
Okay, good, because you're right.
Okay.
You're correct. So good job on that one. Yeah, this is a pretty straightforward question. The other ones just don't exist, but it's important to definitely know these because they come up all the time, not just obviously on the exam, but in your real estate career. So, all right, next one. Alrighty, so Aaron can't get to his property from a public road without crossing over his neighbor Ron's property. In this situation, Aaron needs A/An, and it gives us four options. A variation from local zoning board. B, a variation from the local zoning board and Ron. C, an easement for ingress and egress over Ron's property. Or D, equitable title transfer with the permission of Ron and the local zoning board. So give yourself some time and then figure out that one.
Okay, I believe it's C, easement for ingress and egress over Ron's property.
Correct. That is 100% correct. So if Aaron can't get to his property from a public road without crossing over his neighbor Ron's property, he is defined as landlocked. And if you're landlocked, he would need an easement for ingress and egress over Ron's property to be able to enter and exit the property. So good job on that one. Alrighty. Next one, Mrs. Thompson hired a broker to find her a 100 plus unit apartment complex for sale. Upon finding one she liked, she made an offer for $2.5 million to include all the personal property as well. In order to include all the personal property, Mrs. Thompson needs A/An, and it gives us four options. A, an investment unit loan. B, an amortized loan. C, a package loan. Or D, a balloon loan. So give yourself some time and then come with the answer on that one.
So if it includes personal property, I believe that it is a package loan.
Correct. Good job. So that's the key. That's the key takeaway. And you already, said it. Since the offer includes the personal property, she would be required to do a package loan, because a package loan is a real estate loan used to finance the purchase of both real and personal property. Such as in this case, a fully furnished condominium, things like that. So, or apartment complex. So good job on that one.
Okay. That was a little tough between balloon and package. So I'm going to ask you later on.
Okay.
If you could explain balloon versus package.
Yeah. We'll get into that one later. Okay. So which of the following consumers would most likely qualify and be able to derive the most benefit from a reverse mortgage? It gives us four options. A young homeowner with a low credit score whose property is free of any encumbrances. B, a young couple who wants to own a house, but who doesn't have a high enough credit to qualify yet. C, a middle-aged couple with high credit whose mortgage loan has a higher interest rate than the current rate for new loans. Or D, a couple in their late 60s who need to tap their home equity to help cover their expenses, but do not want to sell their house. So give yourself some time and come up with the answer on that one.
Okay. Well, I know that a reverse mortgage is when you take equity out of your home. So I'm going to say D, a couple in the late 60s.
Yes, good job. So reverse mortgages can provide cash for seniors whose net worth is mostly tied up in the value of their home. So yeah, you pretty much defined it. But, in this instance, age doesn't matter, in fact. It does, in fact, matter because I don't know if you know this, but you have to be at least 62 years or older, to qualify for a reverse mortgage. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know that originally.
I didn't know what age.
Yes, originally, so that's a little bonus tidbit. But yeah, 62 years or older to qualify for a reverse mortgage. And also that there is no minimum credit score requirement for a reverse mortgage. Primarily because the main thing lenders want to know is whether you can handle, the ongoing expenses required to maintain the house. Lenders will, however, look to see if you're delinquent on any federal debt, though. So that's a little bonus little tidbit for you. So, all right, let's do the next one. Okay, antitrust laws. So let's see what this one is. Antitrust laws prohibit competing brokers from all of the following except, and gives us 4 options. A, boycotting other brokers in the marketplace. B, dividing the market to restrict competition. C, agreeing to set sales commissions and management rates. Or D, receiving compensation from both the buyer and the seller. So give yourself some time and figure out the answer on that one.
Okay. Well, I know boycotting is illegal.
Mm-hmm.
And agreeing to set sales commissions is also illegal. So I'm going to go with D, receiving compensation from both buyers and sellers.
Interesting. So that is a correct answer. However, I do have to mention, do you know what D would be defined as?
I don't.
Okay, so
actually.
that would be
dual agency.
Yeah, it would be basically that would be dual agency. Depending on the state, it would be disclosed or undisclosed. But what's interesting is dual agency is not legal in every single state. So that would be something that, if you guys are wondering, is it legal in my state? I encourage you guys to look up. We actually have a full article on that on the website as well, which you can check which is which. But yeah, dual agency is when one agent represents both the buyer and the seller in a transaction. But so here's the deal. So maybe you're in that one state where it is illegal and you're thinking, well, wait a second, that would be illegal. But look at what the question's asking. It says antitrust laws. Antitrust laws don't talk about dual agency at all. And sometimes these questions will do that. They'll throw in things that maybe will be legal or will be illegal, but it won't be specifically defined in that law or that act or whatever it might be. So that is the case in this question. Again, dual agency is legal, but in some states it's not. And again, it's just not distinguished in an antitrust law. That doesn't happen for dual agency. So that's why we got our answer there. So good job. Okay. Are you still doing good? Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
I'm writing down any questions I have too.
Okay, cool. We'll do a little Q&A there at the end. So, all right. So this one is the increase of value with the passage of time is best described as, and it gives us 4 options: A, depreciation; B, appreciation; C, return of investment; or D, return on investment. So just take a little couple seconds and then come up with your answer there.
Okay, well, I know this one for sure.
Okay.
And the increase of value would be B, appreciation.
Yep, totally right. Yeah, so don't get confused with the difference between appreciation and depreciation. Sometimes people can get that confused. And also don't be confused when it comes to these random terms like return on investment or like ROA or things like that. Just read the term, read the definition, and kind of just put the two together, and then you'll be good to go. All right, next one. State laws differ on whether a buyer is entitled to know about. Gives us 4 options. A, the sellers are getting a divorce. B, known lead paint in the property. C, the flooding of the basement every spring. Or D, a suicide that occurred in the house last year. So give yourself some time to come up with the answer in this one and then say it.
Okay, I was just reading about this. I know it's not B, lead paint, because that has to be disclosed. in every state
Mm-hmm.
if it's known. So I'm going to say D, suicide that occurred in the house.
Correct. So, well, let me run through these real fast. So, obviously, A, the buyer doesn't need to know the sellers are getting a divorce. And really, there's no state law determining that, or federal law for that matter. But lead paint and flooding, however, both must be disclosed. And what are they, when we're thinking of these laws, what are those defined as? Well, those are both national laws. Think of the federal lead paint, disclosure for flooding, things like that. Those are all like nationwide laws. Now, state laws differ on whether a buyer is entitled to know about deaths. So an example would be in Texas, deaths from natural causes like suicides or accidents or unrelated to the property do not have to be disclosed. However, deaths related to the condition of the property or violent crime on the property must be disclosed. And then there's other states that impose a duty on quote unquote stigmatized property in which there has been a suicide or murder. So again, what it's asking here, state laws differ. That's totally right. State laws completely differ on whether a suicide should be, or the buyer should be entitled to know about a suicide that occurred in the house. That's a little bit of a tricky one. Okay, so enacted in 1974, which of the following is a regulation that aims to give all the legal individuals an equal opportunity to apply for loans? So it gives us 4 options. A, the Fair Housing Act, B, the Credit Consumer Act, or the CCA, C, the Civil Rights Acts, or D, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or the ECOA. So give yourself some time and then come up with the answer on that one.
Okay, well, I'm not sure about the date. I was always horrible with dates in school, but I know that it should be the Equal Credit Opportunity Act.
That is correct. So the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, or the ECOA, is the regulation that aims to give all legal individuals an equal opportunity to apply for loans. And that covers a bunch of things: race, color, sex, religion, etc. But this act just protects consumers from being wrongfully discriminated. No matter what type of person applies for a loan, they shouldn't be turned away due to factors that are not directly related to their credit. All right, next one. Okay, the 5th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution permit the government to exercise its power of eminent domain. Remember, we were talking about that earlier. Eminent domain is commonly used for, and there's 4 options: A, infrastructure, B, property tax deflation, C, financing loans or mortgages, or D, development of privately owned property. So give yourself some time here and then come with your answer.
Okay, I think it's A, infrastructure, things
Nice.
like highways and roads.
Yes, totally right there. So eminent domain is used to describe the right of the government to take over privately owned real estate, usually despite donors' wishes. But this happens for land that is required for infrastructure. Think highways, pipelines, railroads, all that stuff. But those specific amendments permit the government to do that.
Okay, I have a question about, I'll write this down.
Okay.
About property that's used for the public good, such as hospitals and schools. And I forgot what that was called, so I'll ask you that later, unless you wanted to go over it now.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that because I believe there's a question that has to do with that soon. Okay. So, yeah, keep that one in mind, and we'll review that all at the end, and that goes for everybody else watching. We're gonna have a little Q&A there at the very end where we're gonna go over some other real estate exam related topics from someone who actually has their exam scheduled tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Are you nervous? I guess
a little bit.
Not too bad. A little nervous. Okay. Well, stay confident. Just walk in there with a good head on your shoulders, and I'm sure you'll do great. You've been preparing for quite a while, so you should be good. But all right, let's take a look at this other question. The question says, what is the biggest difference between private private and public land use controls. Gives us 4 options. A, private land use controls are written in the Constitution, while public are up to the local governments. And B, public land use controls are written in the Constitution, while private are up to the local governments. C, the government does not write or enforce private land use controls, but it does impose and enforce zoning. Or D, the government writes or enforces private land use controls, but it does not impose and enforce zoning. So as always, give yourself a couple seconds, 10 seconds or something to figure out your answer on this one.
Okay, so I'm thinking that private land use controls will be something like a deed restriction. I know that the government doesn't enforce those. So I'm going to say C, the government does not write or enforce private, but does impose and enforce zoning.
Correct. Gold star. Yes, so C is the correct answer there. The primary public land use control is what? That's going to be zoning, and obviously it's issued by the government. The primary private land use control is deed restrictions or restrictive covenants, depending on what state in which you live. And those just basically limit what you can do on a property, or as a property owner, what you can do to the property. Now, the biggest difference is that, of course, the government does not write or enforce private controls, but it does impose and enforce public controls like zoning. So yeah, good job on that one. That one sometimes people get slipped up on. Okay, so pretty straightforward one. Which of the following is an example of real property? Gives us 4 options here: a 4K HD TV, couch, wheelchair, or a garage. So go ahead and take a couple seconds and then come with your answer.
Okay. Well, I know they are all real, but they're not considered real property. I believe a garage is the only thing considered real property.
Correct. Do you know why? Oh, for bonus points.
Uh-oh. Well, I know that the TV, the couch, and the wheelchair would be considered personal property.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you mean, but I don't know why it's considered real property.
Well, I guess that's a well, so do you know, I guess what I was asking, do you know what like real property covers?
Not
if
entirely.
Not, okay, so I'll just give you a brief explanation here while we're on it. So real property obviously is all things attached to the land. So you were totally right there. But it also does come with legal rights to it. But that's a different discussion. Real property is usually things immovable. So when you're thinking of things like, a tree, the house itself, a garage, those are going to be things that are considered real property. Now there are some exceptions, which I always find super interesting because I'm a little bit of a nerd, but they can be moved that are still real property. Do you know any examples of that for double bonus points?
Double or nothing.
Yeah. So an exception of an item that can be moved, but is still real property.
I'm thinking of something that goes with real property, something like a garage door opener, but I'm not sure if that's correct.
So basically what I was thinking, and actually that garage door opener, that's a great example. And actually I do not know that, but I would assume so because it goes with it. But what I was thinking was business related items. Business related items are sometimes considered real property. For example, if you have some sort of item that goes with the business, maybe it's let's see, maybe if you're a farmer and it's like a tractor, and you're selling the farming business itself, that tractor could be considered real property. And again, that completely depends. The most popular example, which I'm sure you've heard of, is emblements. Have you heard of emblements?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's like the quote unquote, that's the number one example for that, of something that's technically movable because you can go outside and you can grab your crops, but it's real property because it's connected to that business. And again, I guess that tractor one was a bad example. Emblements is a better example, but because the tractor one kind of does depend. But yeah, just keep that in mind when you're dissecting the difference between real property and personal property, because they do like to mention the businesses and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
all right. So this is kind of what you were talking about earlier, I believe. So for this question, it says, choose the best answer. Which of the following is an example of a special use property? A, sports club, B, strip club, C, public hospital, or D, a Chuck E. Cheese. So go ahead and come up with your answer on that one whenever you're ready.
Well, since you said it has to do with what we were talking about earlier, I'm going to go with C, the public hospital.
Yes, public hospital, yes. So special use property, that's when you're going to be thinking, public hospital. There are some other things like a police department type building. That's when you're getting into special use properties. Did you have a question on that while we're talking about the special use property?
I just forgot what exactly it was called. I didn't remember that it was called a special use property.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay. Next one. Which of the following statements about water rights is true? Choose the best answer. Water rights are pertinent. Water rights are transferable exclusively in quitclaim deeds. Water rights are double taxed, similar to how corporations are taxed. Or the last one, the two basic forms of water rights are ocean rights and lake rights. So go ahead and take some time and then come up with your answer on this one.
Okay. Well, I know water rights run with the land, so I'm going to say A, water rights are pertinent.
Nice. Yes. Good job. Don't get confused with these longer answers. That's totally right. Water rights are appurtenant, meaning that they run with the land and not with the original owner. And you hit it right on the, right on the target, as they say. But yeah, in other words, if an ocean property is sold, the new owner gains the littoral rights and the seller relinquishes his or her rights. So spot on there. And then I believe we just have one more question, and then we'll do that Q&A here at the end. So the majority of homes before blank used lead paint. Gives us 4 dates: 1950, 1972, 1978, and then 1993. So come up with your answer on that one.
Well, dates were always the hardest thing for me to remember. I actually got this wrong the other day. So I'm going to say 1978.
1978 is correct.
Yes, okay.
There you go. Good job. Yes, don't get that one mixed up. That one you're going to need to know, obviously, when you're out there, because that's super important. When you're viewing older houses, you need to be familiar kind of with that because of the federal law covering that. But yeah, great job there. All right, so we just wrapped up our questions portion of this quick review. Spencer had a couple questions for me, and of course, I figured it would be great for you guys to hear him too, because I think he's still struggling with a couple terms here and there, so we're just going to discuss that as well. So, Spencer, what do you got for me?
Okay, so first was the question about the alienation and acceleration, and I was wondering what the difference between those clauses were.
Okay, great question. So they're actually very similar. The definition for the acceleration clause is it's a contract provision that requires a borrower to repay all of an outstanding loan if upon breach of contract. Now, an alienation clause is the clause that's a provision in a mortgage or deed of trust signed with a lender that states that the borrower must pay the mortgage in full before the borrower can transfer property. So if you notice the difference there, the acceleration clause has to do with breaches of contract, while the alienation clause has to do with like transferring of property. So when you think of the alienation clause, it's like an insurance for the banks or lenders, but it prevents new buyers from taking over an existing or previous mortgage. So for example, if a borrower decides to transfer the property, the mortgage must be paid in full in that instance. So it's like someone can't, take over someone's mortgage, get that same rate. Let's say it was like hypothetically lower. Until they fully pay off the loan, then they can transfer the property. So that's the alienation clause. And then again, the acceleration clause comes up with breach of contract. So for example, like that can be a couple different things. Let's just say maybe they don't pay their taxes, or I guess, the number one example would be, like a foreclosure situation. But that's where the acceleration clause comes up, and the alienation clause comes up more again as like if the borrower decides to transfer the property. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I was kind of wondering why.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I'm so happy that you asked me that question because, even I get that mixed up sometimes. I believe on my one video where I go over like the 50 questions, I think that's the one question that I accidentally misspoke on no joke. So, all right, cool. So what else you got for me? What other questions?
Okay. So a question about different types of mortgages, and you mentioned a balloon mortgage and a package mortgage.
Okay, so the package mortgage, as I was mentioning earlier, that's just strictly you're getting the real and personal property. Now a balloon loan though is completely different. That is a mortgage which does not fully amortize over the term, which means the payments are divided into equal amounts. So when you hear the balloon loan, you want to actually think of a balloon, and maybe like the top is like this big payment, and maybe the bottom's like the little payments. That's kind of how they come up with it. But there's examples of those loans. Is like I know Fannie Mae has it's called a Fannie Mae balloon, and that just features monthly payments based on a 30-year mortgage, but it's only for 7 years. Which parties like wondering or maybe you are, maybe not, but parties like, why would you do that? Well, the payments are going to be much lower, and maybe like in 7 years, maybe you're going to be coming up with a lot of money, or maybe in that instance, in 7 years you're like, what, maybe I want to refinance. Then that's where you'd want to do one of those like balloon loans. I don't recommend doing a balloon loan, but again, I'm not an expert on like the financials, but just definitely be familiar with that term if you're still struggling with that. And I do believe we have a video in the course on that. If you do need to watch it, but so that's the difference between the two.
Okay. And another question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I know what condemnation is, but I'm not sure what inverse condemnation was and the difference between the two. Could you explain that?
Sure. Okay. So, condemnation itself is actually the procedure used by a public or private entity, with the powers granted from eminent domain to take privately owned real estate. So I guess the first question would be what's the difference between eminent domain and condemnation? Condemnation and eminent domain are almost keyword almost the same things. The difference is one is the right, while the other is the right to, is the action to do the right. So let me repeat that without misspeaking. The difference is one is the right, while the other is the action to do that right. So in other words, eminent domain is the right which grants the government to take privately owned land from someone, while condemnation is the action of taking that land. So again, it's that action itself, which brings us to inverse condemnation. Now, inverse condemnation is the event in which the government takes private property but fails to pay compensation or just compensation. So think of that, regular condemnation is like perfectly good, and inverse is not good. So for an example, I guess if let's just say there's somebody lives on a property right next to like a bridge, and the state wants to widen the bridge due to like traffic or something like that. Well, the state needs the space, to widen the road and whatnot, and the government seizes the property, and they give $100,000 or like $200,000 to the person. But that person is like, hold on, like this is not what my property is worth. Or maybe they don't give them a dime. Then that is when that would be labeled as inverse condemnation, which is when a property owner can sue to obtain the required compensation, and they would sue it through the process of inverse condemnation. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. So it's a little bit confusing because of the way, they created these terms, but kind of when you break it down with the examples, I think it's a lot easier to figure out, but yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So is that everything, or do you have anything else?
I think that's all I had questions about.
Great. Fantastic. Well, Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Spencer. Spencer. Thank you so much, Spencer. We really appreciate the time. Obviously, everybody here wishes you good luck. Let us know how you do. We're all rooting for you here on our channel as well as the community and stuff like that. So good luck on your exam.
Thank you.
And
thanks for helping me study.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thanks. We'll talk to you later. Okay.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We do videos like this all the time. Well, thank you guys so much for spending your time with me today. I really appreciate it. The community's growing. It's just been such a fantastic experience to share with everybody here on YouTube, kind of what we're doing, what we're all about. And of course, our number one goal here is to get you to pass the real estate exam. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, this is Zach from realestatelicensewizard.com. Make today magical. I'll see you guys next time.